Okay. All right. Hello, and welcome. So my name is Lisa Callahan, and I'm the founder of the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group here on Facebook. I am also the founder of a wonderful program called Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, where I help women to identify their invisible emotional relationship with food through taking a journey of self-discovery. So today we're going to be talking about how to stop mindless eating. And I'm going to share a couple of my own stories because the only way that I ever discovered that I was mindlessly eating was actually through some of my coaching courses that I took for myself. And all of the courses that I took for myself were just not to do with food at all. They were really just to help me to understand myself on a deeper level, to understand where some of the choices that I had made in my life were the wrong choice and took me down paths that I did not ever want to go down, and how I was going to be able to move through that and forgive myself and kind of move into a different direction in my life, because the direction that my life was going was not the one that I had intended. So with this self-discovery, I was able to learn about my eating patterns and habits, and that helped to expose my truth, really, that I was struggling and suffering with an emotional eating habit that I did not know that I had. So I always knew that food was something that in my adult life that I tried very hard to control. It started at quite a young age, probably about 14, 15. Things had been introduced into my mind as far as my weight went, my body image, how that related to how I ate. And then in taking nutrition classes and like learning about things, I recognized that when I was brought up in the 70s, right, everything was kind of fast and it was Pop-Tarts and frozen dinners and such. I started to recognize that, like, nutritionally speaking, that I really wasn't eating the correct foods. So I quickly, when I was quite young, went on very, very severe and very strict diets. And suddenly my body image became like the front runner in my mind, and food became like literally the only thing that I thought of, because I was so busy measuring and monitoring, counting, and all of those things, except for when I was mindlessly eating. Now, it took me decades to discover this and to really think about it, because mindless eating is where you're literally absent to what you're doing. Now, I've had gals tell me that they are sleep eating, literally getting up in the middle of the night, eating, they don't remember it, and then they realize in the morning that they like ate a half a tub of ice cream. This is a real thing. And so even though our minds are very connected and we're very aware, there are parts of us that are subconscious. Now, this is something that I didn't know. And I had to learn, just like you're learning now from me. I learned it from someone else. So as we're thinking about our mindset and we're thinking about our thoughts that are going through our head, I want you to be aware and prepared that there is 60 to 80,000 thoughts that go through your head in a day. Only like, I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was like 200 or something are really identified and processed. Other than that, there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of noise that goes on in the background. There's a lot of things that kind of float in and out. There's a lot of thoughts that are fear-based. There are a lot of thoughts that are, love-based and supportive of your purpose in your life. But there's a lot of background noise, and a lot of the background noise is coming from your subconscious mind. And the thoughts that are coming from your subconscious mind, those are below the level of your conscious awareness. Now, if you didn't know about this, then you wouldn't be able to connect the dots together. And so you wouldn't realize which of your thoughts are meant to help you grow and which of your thoughts are actually meant to keep you stuck. So my first introduction to this, and trust me when I say this is over a decade at least of time spent on self-discovery with myself, reading and learning and going to classes and just taking little pieces of the puzzle as it was introduced to me and applying it into my mindset in a way that allowed me to see not just about like my life in general, but how it related to food and how the food that I was eating and how I was eating it related to how I felt about myself. Now, this was, again, something that I somewhat discovered by accident. It wasn't really taught to me in this way. The way that I teach it is to unravel it for your food thing. But the way it was taught to me was just kind of dumb luck. I was in a coaching class and this wonderful gal, her name is Kathy, and I will share that I was taking coaching classes by a company called Your Infinite Life Coaching Company. I recommend them extremely highly. Please look them up online. It's I think it's www.yourinfinitelifeonline.com. Amazing courses, amazing people. Please go look them up and take some classes. So when Kathy was coaching me, I became resistant in one of the classes. She was trying to help me to be able to see things through a wider lens, and I was hard stop resisting. So Kathy switched directions, and it was so interesting that she did this. And I'm so grateful, because sometimes things that are right in front of our nose are the very same things that we do not see. And tucked within this mindless eating chapter, there are things that are invisible. And so that's why when I coach my clients, I coach them to identify their invisible emotional relationship with food. And that we discover through self-discovery. So Kathy said to me, I want to take a pause here. Lisa, I want you to go over to the snack table and pick anything you want and just bring it back over here. And so I was shocked, really. I was like, what? Why do we have to do food things? I don't get it. And food was a place where I was uncomfortable, because the way that I ate in private was very different than when I ate in public. Trust me when I say in public, I was not mindless, I was mindful. I was aware of every single morsel that I put in my mouth, how it was going to look to the other person, how many, leftovers I had. Maybe I didn't want to eat my whole plate. I wouldn't want to be seen as being somebody who would eat all of that food, So I took very small bites. I was very aware. I would leave a restaurant sometimes starving because I didn't eat enough in front of people. Oh, no, thank you. I won't have dessert. No, I don't, cheese sticks. I don't eat that, that sort of thing. So I played a good part in front of other people. And then when I was alone, that was when I would let loose. Now, the mindless eating, though, what's interesting about this is I know when I binged. Now, again, I would never have told you that I was binge eating, because that word seemed pretty scary. So I just thought, oh, oops, I couldn't stop eating all those cookies, and I ended up eating the whole box. That's one thing. And that I get. But the other stuff, the mindless, the wandering around the supermarket and just kind of nonchalantly putting my hand underneath the chocolate covered almonds and just walking around looking at other things while I was doing this, or, throwing away maybe, quarter of a grilled cheese sandwich for my son. And as I'm washing the dish, my mind was saying that I was washing the dish, but then I mindlessly just grabbed the other half of the sandwich and was eating it like as if I had put it in the garbage disposal. As if, like, in my mind, it's like I threw it away. In reality, I threw it in my body. And so this is the mindless eating that can happen when you're scrolling on Facebook, when you're watching a movie, when you're doing any of the above. So, like I said, this whole eating thing just was I was nervous about it in front of other people. So we had 35 people in this class, and Kathy asked me to go to the snack table and get something, which I chose very responsibly, a strawberry. I could have chosen cookies. I could have chosen chips. I chose a strawberry. And she asked me, Lisa, I want you to eat that strawberry mindfully. And I just was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so she explained to me what being mindful was, and that I was to connect with the strawberry, look at it, smell it, put it to my lips, take a bite, and then chew it and swallow it, and then do that again until the strawberry was done. Now, mind you, I was in front of 35 people. And these in self-discovery are the opportunities to be able to take the risks that you're afraid to take in regular life. And so although I felt like running out of the room, although I felt like telling her absolutely not, this is ridiculous, although I felt like narrowing my mindset and putting a hard stop to this absurdity, I did it. I chose to do it. And within that 5-minute span of me eating this one strawberry, I lost myself in the food. I actually connected with it. I felt it. I tasted it. It touched my tongue. It filled my spirit. Like I could feel the difference. And that was the introduction, the ignition, the little lighting of a flame inside of my mind that allowed me to recognize where I was just on autopilot and where I was using food to disconnect me from my spiritual self, where every mindless bite was another opportunity for me to stay stuck. Now, this didn't change overnight, and it certainly didn't change without help. I continued to be thirsty for information. I wanted to understand it because what I felt eating that strawberry mindfully was nowhere near what I felt when I was eating anything mindlessly. And so because I didn't know the difference between the two, it was difficult for me to understand or interpret what mindful or mindless was because I had nothing to compare it against. Once I was able to compare it against something, I was like, oh, that's not what I'm doing. And so being aware is really the first step of the process into understanding what's underneath this food thing, as I call it. And so when I got home and I started to recognize the difference, and I really I had felt that in the class, and it's amazing to do something in that way, because if you can do it once, then you can do it again. So for a little bit of time, I was trying to be more mindful, and I was trying to pay attention to the mindfulness. But at the same time, just changing the habit alone, trying to slow down, trying to chew, trying to put my fork down, trying to pay attention to the smells of the food, it wasn't enough. And the reason why it wasn't enough is because somewhere still tucked in my deepest part of my subconscious, there was a reason why I was eating mindlessly to begin with. And so without understanding that reason, without understanding the root cause of the problem, I went right back to my old habits. And it took me another probably 2 or so years to figure this out on my own. And as I figured it out, I understood that underneath the root cause of the problem. So now remember, conscious thoughts, subconscious thoughts. One of the other things that I learned from your Infinite Life coaching company was that your subconscious intentions are found in your results. So I started to think about it. I started to put 2 and 2 together, and I started to think, well, when I ate mindfully, I felt connected with myself as a whole, as a spiritual self. When I'm eating mindlessly and I'm just eating, like afterwards, I kind of am like, oh, wait a minute, like, what did I do? And I felt disconnected with myself. I felt angry at myself. And one of the big parts that kept coming up over and over again was guilt. I kept feeling guilt, and shame, guilt and shame, guilt and shame. It just kept coming up. And I recognized that underneath the mindless eating lived guilt and shame. And so I started to think about it, and I started to think, well, hang on. If my results that I'm getting are guilt and shame, and I'm eating this stuff, and that's bringing me to guilt and shame every time, then maybe feeling guilt and shame is my subconscious intention. Wow. And if I keep feeding that subconscious intention with mindless eating, well, then my subconscious intention of feeling guilty will just grow because I'm feeding it. Does that make sense? And so I had to channel things in a different way. And again, this is not something that I was taught. I had a practice. I had to do trial and error. I had to try this and then back out and say, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else. But now that I have perfected this, now that I have been able to flip the switch from the things that might feel good in the moment. Yeah, it feels really good to take that grilled cheese off the plate and pretend that I threw it in the disposal while I throw it in my mouth, right? And just forget all about it. That might feel good in the moment, but it didn't feel good long term, because long term, when I was really thinking about it at the end of the day, I'm like, oh gosh, I could have done this differently. I could have done this differently. I could have done this differently. And in fact, one of the ways that I figured that out was through another schooling that I took, which is called the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And what I would do there is I would fill out a nightly form, and it was like a journaling. And the journaling said, like, what decisions did you make for yourself today that were not in alignment with, what you intended? And then I would like think about it. I'd be like, oh, wow, I had a handful of this, I did a handful of that, I did this, I did that. And then I would have like a list of 10 things that I was like, gosh, that wasn't what I wanted. And so it really took me getting aware and being able to make these discoveries about myself that allowed me to connect the dots. And that is what I help you do now, right? Because I didn't know how to do it then, and now I do. So when I started to recognize that this subconscious intention in me even existed, and that I was feeding the subconscious intention with the food, well, then all of a sudden the food became unimportant. It could have been anything. I could have literally mindlessly overeaten grapes and celery, and it might have still gotten me to the same feeling of that disconnection with myself. And so this is where the pieces of the puzzle are getting misinterpreted when you're just trying to change your habits with food, or maybe you're trying to slow down your eating. Maybe you're trying to change your habits. But if you don't understand the root cause of the problem, and you don't understand why those habits are there to begin with, what are those habits fueling? Then you won't be able to get to the root cause. And then you will go back to your old ways, even if for 3 months or so, you're like, I'm doing really well, I'm doing perfect. It'll come back. And the reason why I know it'll come back is because it will come back anyways. It's just that when you're aware, then you can quickly say to yourself, oh, wait a minute, I know what I'm doing, and then get yourself out of it. Whereas if you don't know what the reason is, you're just going to be like, failed again, don't know, right? And so it's the root cause of the problem that is the one that's hungry for the things that you are using the food, the actual food, the mindless eating, to get to. So here's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself. I want you to think about your patterns. For me, it was always this like, I would turn into the grocery store telling myself that I was just going to buy vegetables. Meanwhile, I literally would leave with, I have no idea how much I possibly ate in a supermarket. Just going from little piece of, I would go into those places like Whole Foods that has like the bulk things, and I would just get a little handful of this, a little handful of that. And I'd walk around the store, and it was like, that was an invisible time for me. And so I recognized it when I started to change these habits and patterns. And I started to realize that every time I did that, like that was adding, it was fueling the end result, which was guilt, which I didn't want. I mean, first of all, I was stealing candy, really, if you want to look at it that way too. That doesn't feel good. But at the same time, when I really started to look at my pattern and say to myself, like, what am I doing? And be able to shake that pattern up and break that pattern, then I was able to at least see clearly. So think about your patterns, write it down. Like, what do you tend to do? Do you come into your house and automatically go right to the refrigerator? Do you grab a snack and then tell yourself that you're going to unwind and relax, but then that snack just continues for the rest of the night, right? Like, what do you do? What's your pattern? The second thing you can do is to ask yourself, like I said, what results are you getting that are mismatched from what you say you want? Me eating mindlessly, I didn't think that that was giving me guilt. Like, I didn't think about it at all. Like, literally, like a half a grilled cheese, like that wasn't a binge in my mind, right? In my mind, like, okay, if I eat, 30 cookies, I mean, you can't not feel guilty after that, can you? I don't know. That I understood that, right? That was clear. But a little of this, a little of that, here and there, I didn't equate that to guilt. I didn't think that it existed. I didn't think it was a thing, that it was there. It was giving me results that were mismatched from what I said I wanted. And so I want you to think about that. Where are your results of what you're getting mismatched from what you say you want? And then you can question that as well. The third thing is to ask yourself why. As you figure out what the results that you're getting are that are mismatched from what you say you want, you can start to think about asking yourself why. So let's say, for example, I went ahead and was eating something that I didn't want to eat. And then maybe I recognized that that was going to give me guilt. So I've already figured out my, result that I was getting that I didn't want. And then maybe I would ask myself, Lisa, why do you want to feel guilt right now? And I did this. I literally wrote it down on a piece of paper because I remember thinking to myself as I was like mindlessly, and I would just stop and then be like, wait a minute, why do you want to feel guilty right now? And that like broke the spell. And then I was like, actually, I don't. And then I was able to push it away. And then I would ask myself why. I wrote it down, literally wrote it down on a piece of paper. So let's say, this is just an example. It's an exercise called the 5 whys. I didn't make this up either. I can't remember who I got this from, but somebody else's training. I don't remember who. So why do you want to feel guilty right now? And then maybe I would answer and I would say, I don't want to feel guilty right now. And then maybe I would write down my second why. Well, okay, why are you going to eat that grilled cheese? Why are you going to eat that leftover thing sitting there that's stale on the table that's been sitting there for 4 hours? Why are you going to eat that right now? And then maybe my answer would be like, well, because it tastes good. Okay, why do you think it tastes good? Well, because it helps me relax. It feels good in my body. Like it just feels like that would be something that would help me relax. And so see how the answers come out in a different way. And then you wrote, and then you could do another why and say, well, why are you not relaxed? And then maybe you might say, because I'm nervous about X, Y, and Z. And then you could say, well, why are you nervous about X, Y, and Z? And then you write because, so on and so forth. So do you see like how from the top why to continue to ask yourself the questions completely open up a new door? Because the real truth is that underneath the surface there, maybe I was nervous about, X, Y, and Z. But I told myself that it was just like, oh, look at that stale grilled cheese. How awesome, right? And so that is where I was able to make some changes in my patterns and to be able to think about things in a new way. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this training today on mindless eating. And if you want some more information from me, you can contact me on my PM, on my email, which is coachlisacallahan@gmail.com. Okay. Bye now.